We are thrilled that you're all here with us. We have people from Sacramento, from Nevada, from Ohio, from Florida. So thank you so much for joining us. This is really wonderful. And we appreciate your interest in learning more about homelessness and some of the experiences that our in-housed neighbors are having in our community through the eyes of our staff. So my name is Christy Holdreger. I'm the Vice President, Chief Development Officer for Volunteers of America, and I've been with the organization for just over 30 years. And I have learned so much about some of the root causes of homelessness, some of the solutions, and what it really takes to move somebody from homelessness to housing and employment, and to really strengthen our community all around. So thank you for being here. We wanted to have this discussion. We did this about a year ago, and we heard from some board members and Leo and our director up here in Reno last year, but now we wanted to have a little bit different perspective from our staff that are actually working in the programs, and they can share some of their experiences and what they see every day and what it really takes to help move somebody and really learn about what they want to accomplish. So I am going to go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce themselves with their name, how long they've been with Volunteers of America, the populations that they serve, and the different services that they've been involved with Volunteers of America over the years. So Anna Cornelius, would you like to start?
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Cornelius. I've been with Volunteers of America for 12 years, and I work with the family shelter side of Volunteers of America.
Thanks, Anna. And Anna Darzan.
Hello, everybody. Please forgive me, my voice is leaving me, but my name's Anna Darzans. I've been with VOA for 4 years, and I work with chronically homeless individuals, right now 100 women, and in emergency shelters. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And Scott Benton.
Hello, everyone. I am Scott Benton. I have been with Volunteers of America coming up on 5 years in November, mainly serving the men's shelter here in Reno, recently moving over to a co-ed shelter for adults. So we serve both men and women. And then I also get the honor and the privilege to serve those that are experiencing homelessness, formerly homeless, and are veterans in some of the permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, and bridge housing programs we operate here.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So what you're going to learn from our panelists is they have a variety of different experiences serving this population, and some of the traumas that they've experienced and what works and what doesn't work. So I'm going to start off with a question for Anna Cornelius. Anna, could you share a little bit about your story and how your lived experience it affects how you're able to serve the families at the family shelter?
I believe my personal experience with homelessness allows me to share a deeper connection, a deeper understanding, a deeper level of compassion, empathy, and most of all, sensitivity. Because in most cases, I have either been directly impacted or indirectly impacted. Meaning, I was homeless, I was abused physically, mentally, emotionally, I was addicted to drugs, and also I've been incarcerated for a short time. And it allows me, that was directly. Indirectly, I've been impacted. As a child, I witnessed abuse with my mother and other men fighting. I witnessed alcoholism as a child. And so all the way into my adulthood, I believe knowing these things allows me not to judge and be so harsh with the population we serve. So it helps me to learn how to further do no harm, so to speak. Because of my experience, I'm able to deal with them in a different way.
Great, thank you. You often share about how hard it is to live homeless. A lot of people see individuals that are living outside and they don't understand why it takes so long for them to move past that to accept services. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. So for me, when I was homeless, I could give you my experience. When I was homeless, it took me some time to learn how to live homeless. Um, where to use the bathroom, how to wash up, how to survive, how to dress to appear intimidating, because of course it's dangerous out there. So once and also, how do I get out this homeless situation? Because when I was in it, it was hard to even find a way out. So once I was there was a therapeutic value there for me. Um, once the door opened for me to get out, and then once I was able to start living again, I had to relearn how to live, how to live on my own. And it took someone else, it took someone to care to actually open up to me, for me to open up to them, to tell them what I need. And then it was a whole nother journey. It didn't happen overnight. It takes time.
You talk about some of the things that you experienced when you were homeless. How did those experiences impact your emotional well-being?
Oh, so when I was homeless, so dealing with homelessness is one thing, but when it takes me to remember where I was, right? So I couldn't believe, whose air am I breathing? I was so devastated with my life. I didn't want to live. I didn't know who to turn to in order to survive this homelessness. So for me, I have to remember that pain. It's easy to say, yeah, I remember being homeless and it was cold outside. No, I remember the actual pain. So for me, it was like, I don't want to live anymore. I can't do this alone. And at the same time, I'm scared to even open up to people to ask for help. Or am I going to be judged? I was embarrassed. How did I get here? I don't even know how I got there. So for me, I have to remember the pain, the actual pain. And my eyes are tearing up right now because I could actually remember feeling that pain. So working with the population we work with now, by me remembering that pain, I don't want anyone to feel that pain, to actually know that somebody's hurting and they don't know how. Some of them just don't know how to reach out and get this help. So for me, just being that person to listen and be upfront with them, be there when I say, okay, let's have a talk, let's have this discussion, and don't brush them off, and be that opening ear to listen to what they have to say. And then let's work on how we can change this together. I can actually feel the pain. I don't want anybody to feel that pain. And I need to remember that. I need to remember that pain, because if I don't, I might be doomed to repeat it myself. So that's how working with this population for me is near and dear to my spirit. And I don't even know how I got in this position, but I think it's a spiritual thing for me. I think my experience is a huge impact on people, because if I didn't experience it, how would I help this population? How would I help anybody if I didn't experience? I always tell people that being a mother of twin girls, if I didn't have those experiences, I wouldn't have something to give them, so they won't repeat what I've done myself. So it's like a blessing in disguise for me.
Anna, you are a blessing to so many people. And I know your nickname is Mama Anna at the shelter, and there's a reason for that. So thank you for being so open about your story. And I was going to ask Anna Darzan to kind of talk a little bit about her experience, but we had just gotten a question from one of our guests, and he said there are so many myths about homelessness that they don't want to be in the shelters, that they're happy to camp. Anna Darzan, can you talk a little bit about that? What would you say to somebody that thinks that, well, that's a choice, they want to be out there?
I would say that this is a population that doesn't have a lot of trust, is continuously victimized by their peers and by people who come to victimize people, right? So the outside community and their peers, they have severe trauma and moral injury, and that has just affected their ability to feel safe. And being around people, especially when they've been victimized by so many, it's really hard for them to feel like it's okay to come and sleep near them, or come inside and maybe not be able to leave, or follow, like, be given rules that they're not sure that they could actually comply with. And so I think there's a lot of layers in it, and I could give an example of just how severe some of the trauma is. One of the ladies I had met with on the street a long time ago when I did street medicine, I would bring doctors outside. She'd say, "Anna, I understand they're going to make me have sex, but why do they have to beat me up as well?" Right? So for us, we know she's reporting, she's telling me about a rape, but this is something that she's resigned to, right? But there's additional, like, violence and violations, spiritual violations to their souls, that have been done. And sometimes coming inside and submitting your will, or whatever will happen to you, to a system or a group of people that you don't know, is one of the most frightening things you could do.
Anna, you touched on moral injury. Can you explain to our guests what moral injury is?
I have my own definition, and to kind of explain it so that it isn't maybe so abstract. We hear about it with veterans who have gone to war and maybe done something that was atrocious, and have trouble adjusting to coming home, maybe having to kill a child and then not knowing how you could be a good parent. So this thing that you either have done, or you've seen, or you didn't do, right? I could have saved someone and I didn't do them. I didn't behave well. That actually disrupts your moral compass and how you see yourself as a good person, or having any value. So a lot of times that could be like a sexual assault. That could be taking something so that you could survive from someone who may need it to survive as well. That could be a physical assault, right? That could be a sexual assault. So it's something that you've seen, something that you've done, or something that you didn't do that has disrupted your moral compass, and that in effect kind of makes you feel marked as a bad person. So I wear that I wear my bad deeds as a coat, right? And I wear them as a coat that I think all of you can see. And because of that, it affects my behavior. I may be a little more angry. I may be a little more indifferent. I may behave like do dangerous things. There's a variety of ways people behave, or just not speak to people. But I wear it like a coat because I think you can see my coat of shame. But in fact, you can't, right? So you're sitting on the other side of this, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this, right? Why do you behave this way? And yet I don't realize that you don't see all my shame. And on top of it, I never get to say, I'm not gonna wear that today, until you've actually addressed all of those moral injuries and processed them. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I know that.
No, I think that's great. And what percentage of the individuals that we see throughout all of our programs have experienced a moral injury, would you say?
I would say most all. If you think about a child growing up, and they see someone who's homeless, they see someone who's addicted, and right away they're taught, like, get over here, that person's not safe, that's not okay, right? And even if it isn't a traumatic event that had happened earlier in their life, the odds that there is a great, chance that just becoming homeless and becoming part of this group that is so stigmatized and you were taught was a bad person that should be feared, could even be a moral injury itself. And so it's definitely it's definitely a challenging, and I think that there's a lot of impacted individuals.
Thank you. Because I know you focused a little bit on veterans, but and so it was really interesting to hear you say even people that have been told those that are homeless are either bad people or they're lazy or whatever, and then you have that judgment, and then all of a sudden you fall into it. But then we also, youth that have been abused or gone through foster care or incarcerated or whatever trauma they've experienced, and then they end up homeless. So they are also suffering from that moral injury, would you say? I want to ask Scott about how difficult it is to leave homelessness. You talked about that the other day, about all the different things that you have to do and how difficult it is. But I have a quick question that I wanted to address from one of our guests. It says, what is the balance between the narrative that the unhoused are vulnerable and need our love and the reality that the peer-to-peer abuse occurs without accountability to the perpetrators of violence? How can we separate people who are violent from the people who need intervention? And I think you probably, Anna Darzan has done the most outreach. How would you answer that?
I would say we really need to have a better system in addressing violent offenders overall, because I've, during my time on street medicine, I have gone to like loaves and fishes or areas with extreme, like severe mental illness and homelessness, and have found like someone who had just been released on an ankle monitor with like high control, or what is it, the parole, where they know you're a risk, and they've basically been given like 20 feet to kind of sit on with their ankle monitor without violating. So we really need systems that are actually addressing kind of violent behaviors, and find ways that we could also bring individuals in. So having it being violent is the surest way to get kicked out of a program. And that's one of the things that we have to do and we have to manage in order to keep people safe. And so how it's just basically reaching out to people and making sure that they want some resources, they want help, which I've come to find that most people are not service resistant. It's just, are you offering them something that they're willing to take? Do they understand that you are their partner? Do they trust you? And so those all are really important factors in getting someone to participate in services. But also, you're absolutely right, there are a lot of predators who I would venture to say that not only are large numbers of women sexually assaulted out on the street, but so are men. So are men. There's no way we can be releasing sexually violent offenders to the loaves and fishes area, or to the gospel mission, and believe that that's going to be enough in addressing their behavior and keeping the rest of society safe.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. I think we're getting lots of questions, and I appreciate that. I'm going to try to get to some of those, but Scott, I wanted you to address a little bit about how difficult it is when somebody does come into the shelter. What are all the steps that they have to make or take to move along, and how long does that take?
Thank you for the question, Christy. Some things that I have noticed is that people come into the shelter not having a plan of housing and what housing may look like. So asking them those hard questions, what does housing look like? And ensuring to anybody that it is hopeful and housing can be obtainable in whatever fashion that it looks like. And getting them to that point is often hard as the community resources are little to none. And Volunteers of America, as our agency, we really go out and try to bring those resources or get the clients to the resources that they need. One of the big ones that I see, or two of the big things that I see here in Reno, and I'm sure it's a crisis across the country, is having your ID and your birth certificate so that you can obtain housing or obtain some sort of employment or supplement your income some sort of way, so that you can be given that opportunity to have affordable housing. A lot of our landlords require you to have an ID so they know who they're renting to. And the other thing that I see is navigating the community resources, navigating the healthcare system is that big one. Those of us on the call often go to a primary care doctor when we don't feel well. The individuals that I serve at the shelter here in Reno they use the emergency room as their primary care provider. So they're using the resources of the emergency transportation to get to the emergency room for a stub toe or for an open wound that they can easily go to a primary care doctor for, or even when their blood pressure is high. They feel like emergency room is the best route to go. So getting those that we serve through our programs to understand the resources that are available to them and help them navigate. Sometimes they don't know how to navigate, how to fill out an application for an apartment, or how to fill out an application for an ID, or even how to get in contact with a medical provider. So getting those resources available and ready to use, and allowing the participants of the program to drive the car that they're in, be the driver of the services that they want, and we're there to support them. I think it's important for them to, I say this all the time, for them to feel human. And if they're taking the steps to do what they need and we're there to support them, they really will feel that hope that they need, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Scott. You mentioned the other day about how long it takes just to get your driver's license. And I would imagine a lot of the guests that we see don't even realize that they need that driver's license. And so letting them know how that could be a barrier to their next step. How long does it take for them to even access that?
Well, currently it's taking 3 to 4 weeks just to get an appointment here at the local DMV. You have to have some sort of internet to schedule the appointment. They don't do it over the phone. So they really have to, somebody has to be there to help them navigate that system. And that's something that our case managers have understood. You have to have an appointment to do something like that. So they try to engage that case management. I had a gentleman just the other day utilize our transportation service thinking that they did walk-in. So he rode the van down to the DMV, which is about 10 miles away from where the shelter is now. And they turned him away. They said, no, you have to have an appointment, but we can't schedule you an appointment. You have to do it online. So he came back to the shelter and I actually sat down with him, and the next available appointment was in the middle of May. And so he is lucky enough to be on this voucher program that our local housing authority has to help him with the ability to pay for his housing. But part of their process is you have to have an ID and a birth certificate. So it puts that process just to get housed even further back. 4 weeks to get an appointment, and then 2 to 3 weeks after that to actually get the ID. And then he can go meet with somebody and say, I finally have my ID. But that's not it. You need your ID to get your birth certificate. So it's these things, they go hand in hand. IDs and birth certificates are some of the things that are often lost or stolen when they're out on the river. It's one of the biggest complaints that I hear about is people are losing IDs and wallets and birth certificates and social security cards. And so when they come into this shelter, we assume everybody's been traumatized by something. Coming into the shelter is traumatizing itself just because you have to go accept help, right? You have to ask for help. But not only that, we assume everybody needs to start at ground zero. They need IDs, they need social security cards. So those sorts of things really set up a great plan to get out of the shelter. However, the housing, affordability, housing, they don't go hand in hand in Reno. And I'm sure they don't go hand in hand in Sacramento either. So really helping people understand that, yes, you have to get on a wait list, but there is something out there that is just right for you. We just have to find it, and getting them to express what they really want and not just settle for something, not say they want a studio apartment because it's the cheapest out there, but they really have 2 kids and they're going to live in a studio apartment isn't ideal for them.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Anna, Cornelius, you talk about some of the barriers for our families to move into the housing and the cost of like just applications. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there's the main one is fear, first of all. A lot of it is fear. And then there's the application fees that they have to pay over and over again, which messes with their budget. That is non-refundable. Yes.
Yeah, so it's like, and so they're, yeah, that's, I would imagine is a challenge when you're using whatever resources you have, whatever income you have to apply for housing, and you may not even get it. And then you have to wait another month until you have the resources again to apply for those application fees. We have a question, I think probably Anna Darzan, but anybody could answer this. The assumption is that it'll be years before we have shelter space and services for all those that are unhoused. What do you think about bringing service to the encampments? Portable toilets, water, garbage pickup, security, water, and food. We could improve their living standards while we find help for them, and it would also ease the transition back into society. Is that an assumption? And also, Anna, if you could, if you could try to answer that, but also talk about the difference of the population today versus pre-pandemic.
I would love to. I think that even in some smaller ways, we are actually doing something similar. We have like these safe grounds where someone could go and camp in the city of Sacramento and have security there, and they're fed there. There's access to bathrooms, and there's access to showers, which is great. And they do have some case management out there. They have everybody in tents to help try to stabilize them and move them on to housing. So it can work, and it could be really helpful. I think that there's been a lot of changes in homelessness, the way the population expresses their lived experience. So like traditionally we have campers, people who live kind of in the sticks somewhere and in a camp, and they live in a community, and we may fight with one another, but you're not going to let anybody from the outside that doesn't live as part of our community hurt me, right? And so you'll feed me when I'm hungry, and I'll feed you when you're hungry. So this kind of community setting. And then we have these like other individuals who live more in kind of independently. They're like unsheltered street is what I'd say, is because you may live in the tent right next to me, but you probably don't know my name. You probably won't try to do anything to help me if I'm being assaulted or robbed. And I don't know your name probably. And if your tent moves, I may take your spot if it's better. So there isn't that community and mutual assistance with a lot of people who live on the street. And we have like people who live in doorways of businesses who are even more like isolated. They live publicly, but are not really addressed. So how many times have we walked past someone who's homeless? And if they're crying out, how many people are going to ask them, are you hurt? Are you hungry? Has someone done something to harm you? Odds are most people are going to keep walking by. So they kind of have this veil of invisibility of suffering so publicly. But today, when the pandemic hit us, we had a shelter in the downtown area, and it was really eerie to see all the people disappear because they were sheltering at home, and all that you saw was the homeless community. Since then, as we have kind of opened up our businesses, gone back to work, relaxed on wearing masks, gather frequently, we've noticed that the population of homeless people has also changed. In many of the like main thoroughways, we're seeing people who are living in tents with structures on the side of their tents, kind of these hard surfaces, making it more durable. They may have a couch outside next to their tent, or a barbecue next to it. And so there's some changes, to what it's going to take to actually serve that community. We don't know enough about them, I'd say, to really know what it's going to take to get them inside, because a lot of them have such, and I call them like a mega camp, right? It's not just a tent, but we're talking like household items that are outside as part of their encampment. And I think the bargaining or the give and take to get them to leave their encampment is going to be different than it would be for someone who may be living out in the brush somewhere unseen, you know. And it's just, it's different. We see like thousands of cars drive by them every day. And it used to be something that you did not want to be seen. But they're kind of living in these very kind of large encampments with semi-permanent structures sometimes. And so there's something really new about that particular community that we have a lot to learn about.
Anna, would you say that some of those individuals are feeling like they can take care of themselves better than you as a provider or a shelter? So they're just going to do it on their own, and they're going to build their structure, and they're going to have their couch, and they're going to kind of build that own and pretend that they're invisible. I mean, they're putting, you know, tarps surrounding their area. And it's interesting, you said we need to learn a lot about that kind of new population. Now it's like a third segment. What would you say? I mean, you were part of our first low barrier shelter in 2017. So we're now doing these low barrier shelters both in Sacramento and in Reno. What did we learn from that population the first time? Because traditionally shelters, you had to be clean and sober to come in. There was lots of rules. You can bring in pets, you can bring in partners, and you can bring in personal property. And now that's all different. So what did we learn?
We had to adjust the way we allowed people to come into shelter. We had to make space for their belongings, or negotiate like reasonable amounts of belongings, create spaces where people can live together if they're part of a community or they identify as a family, where before it was really strict, like it was male and female, whether you were legally married or not. And today, you know, whatever the family looks like, we have to find a way to value that, because that's how people are going to feel comfortable. We also learned that that we have to understand a lot about kind of what their living situation, how they express it, what do they need to feel comfortable, so that we can actually begin to address that. I mean, a lot of times some of these belongings, massive amount of belongings, are really a signal of someone who's severely traumatized. Someone has experienced this agonizing pain, whether it was an assault, whether it was a loss, whether they're mourning, and they find an object, something that makes them feel better. And now that object holds this meaning of like feeling better that is now so valuable to them that they'll take it with them everywhere they go. And so we just have to do a lot of work with trauma, use a trauma-informed lens, meet people where they are, let them decide the plan. You know, that's one of the biggest things is, do they know, have they had participation in part of their like plan to move home? Because if they don't even know their plan, no, they haven't. And they're probably not going, they're going to disappear on moving day, because I've seen that happen too, right? People will get ready for move-in day, and then the van's ready to take them home, and you can't find them. And they might come back later that night and say, I'm scared, I don't want to go. You know, so there's a lot of work, a lot of invisible work that has to be done with people to help kind of understand what they need to feel comfortable in these new settings and moving into housing.
Thank you. You talk about that a lot of work needs to be done, and sometimes we don't know what that work is. Can any of the panelists talk about kind of what that first step is when somebody comes into the shelter, and maybe kind of their demeanor coming in? and then maybe 2-3 weeks, a month later. And I know Cornelius, you've had some of those big transformations that you've seen, and how do you also work with your staff so they understand when somebody's angry and verbal? How do you coach them to kind of step back and not engage?
Yes, so we have to like start meeting people where they're at. So how do we even get there, right? So for me, it's interaction. You have to form a relationship of some sort. And for me, a relationship is anyone I come in contact with. If I say good morning to you, I'm already establishing a relationship. Meeting where they're at is literally that. If they're frigid and scared, smile, show genuine love. And then eventually they open up little by little. But we have to have some sensitivity there, because most of the people that come to this shelter are scared, frightened, beaten down. We have to be sensitive. And then that's kind of how I got my name, Mama Anna, in a way, is you got to let them come to you in some cases, in most cases. And as far as staff, we have to continuously have some education around being sensitive. We don't know where anyone is and where they at. So for me, I just picture everyone that walked through the door, including staff, has experienced something really bad. That allows me to be sensitive no matter what. Because again, I've already experienced so much myself that I remember the pain, that I don't want anybody to ever feel that pain that I went through, even though I can't control that, but I can have an impact on the outcome. If I show love, they see love, then they open up, and then I follow through with helping them as much as I can.
Thank you. I've heard all of you talk a little bit about this, but I wanted to circle back on that difference in somebody's demeanor inside the shelter versus outside the shelter. And Anna Cornelius talked about it when she was experiencing homelessness, that she had to look unapproachable. Any of you, do you want to talk about, because I've seen this myself with individuals that are outside, they look scary and unapproachable, and I don't feel comfortable. I might smile at them, I might say hello, but they're kind of giving me these signals, back off. And that same individual that's in the shelter that I walk by are coming up and they have a smile on their face and they're engaging. Why is that? What's going on there?
Well, it took me a long time to trust again. When I was homeless, I seen so much happening around me. I didn't know how I got there. I felt like my family abandoned me. And I seen some really bad things. And I had to look unapproachable. I had to look dangerous, because after all, I'm a girl out there in the world, and it's scary. It's scary. And I don't know how I got there. I really don't. I didn't see a way out of it. So I dressed like a boy, baggy pants. I carried a weapon I didn't know how to use, but I needed to appear scary. At the same time, I was just a teddy bear inside crying for help. I was crying for help. I didn't know how to get it. So I'm sure a lot of people seeing me and was scared to approach me because of that. But once the door was open and I felt a little bit of love from somewhere, it takes a while. Like I said, I learned how to live outside. It didn't happen overnight. And then once I was rescued, so to speak, and then I opened up, I had to relearn how to live inside again. It's a scary thing for those people out there. We don't know how they got there. But nobody was born saying, I want to be homeless. No one was born saying, I want to use drugs. No one was born saying, I'm going to be mentally unstable. I mean, it's our job as human beings, for me, to help in any way I can. It's just that I just got to figure out how. I mean, how can I help? And the only way I could see for me to do it is to actually build a relationship with any individual that wants help. They're crying out. They're really crying out.
Thank
I
you.
think Anna's
Go
absolutely
ahead,
right.
Scott.
Sorry, I think Anna's
okay.
absolutely right. Relationships are the foundation to getting people to where they want to be. Like she said, nobody wants to be homeless, but getting out of the situation that they're in, they don't know who to trust. They don't know who to turn to. And if you say you're going to do something, you have to follow through on that. That's the foundation of building that trust. And then those are going to be the people that once they are housed, they're going to come back to you and ask, how do I use a computer? I really want to connect with somebody on social media. They're going to ask those things that nothing's going to be too proud for them to ask. And it's really important to build those relationships from the first time. You don't get a second chance when you're serving those that are homeless. It's the first impression is everything to them.
Yeah, it was from what I've heard from you all saying, it's pretty scary to leave the life that you've gotten used to and you've learned to live outside and then walk in the doors and not know what to expect and what's going to be asked of you and what you have to change. You already are kind of comfortable out there and now you want me to do something else. The other thing that Anna had mentioned that I wanted to circle back on is it's, it didn't happen overnight. Somebody didn't just happen overnight, become homeless. It was weeks, months, years, different traumas. So how can we expect them to change in a week or a month of services? Does anybody want to talk about that?
I think that definitely it's a long path. It's a really long path. When you're outside, you have this, you're living on adrenaline in this high level of just stress. And when you come indoors, right, you're a little apprehensive and unsure. And after a couple days of eating, a couple meals, right, it's taking a shower, sleeping. This process begins to happen. It's like it's kind of, I've seen people have exacerbations of trauma that they can now feel because they are out of that adrenaline state. I've seen people come in and have a stroke, not have their medication and pass out. So there's these biochemical type of reactions that they get, but it takes sometimes a while for them to adjust, maybe a couple of weeks before they kind of feel safe in being there. And are able to actually participate in making a plan for them. And it's really always important to engage them in a plan soon after they arrive. If you make it if you make it too comfortable for someone to just come inside and just be there, then they may not realize that they get to go anywhere else. There has to be language around. So we're just going to be we're going to be family for a little while, and you're going to move home, and it isn't, you're not meant to stay here forever, and letting them know you're there to help them with that. And I think I totally forgot or strayed away from your question, Christy.
No, that's okay. I think that's I have another question. You talked kind of about their health. And, on average, the individuals that are walking through the doors, it may be a little bit different from the family shelter versus our two emergency low barrier shelters. But what is the average health of somebody walking in the doors?
Not very good. It's a lot of people who've had a stroke, congestive heart failure, unmanaged diabetes, amputations, just all of these really difficult to manage chronic conditions when you're out on the street. And especially if you're still participating in using drugs, because that makes it even harder. So we definitely, sometimes, we have almost in every row, I have a woman either in a wheelchair or a walker. And they're having these conditions starting in their 40s. We're not talking about a lot of older adults, and at the shelter there's even more like older adults who've been managing out on the street all of this time. And so it's just it's helping them kind of stabilize their physical conditions as well as their mental health.
Thank you. So we have about 9 minutes left. If anybody has any additional questions, please put them in the chat. But I wanted to ask one thing of our 3 panelists. So is there hope? I mean, we're seeing an increase in homelessness.
There is hope. There's hope in everything. There's hope in the more people that are willing to reach out for services means that people want to change the situation that they're in. Hope starts with the people that they meet when they walk in the doors, and that's often us.
Mhm.
Hope is something that we have to remind people that is around in our community. You can't give up hope when somebody's asking for help.
I believe there's hope, but I also believe that no one person can do it alone. We need to band together. We see there's a problem, and we need to band together and try to help.
I love that you say that, Anna, and I'll let Anna Darzan answer it. But I think when we're talking about we need to band together, so it's a partnership with providers like Volunteers of America, our local government, funders, individual donors, corporations, volunteers, because it's not one person's problem, right?
Mhm.
It really takes a whole community to care and to offer hope and to offer love. And it's definitely challenging, especially when we're seeing this go out to the suburban areas that they're not used to. They're used to seeing it maybe in the city or maybe just on the rivers and the parkways. And that's frustrating because you want to go ride your bike and you want to go for a run and you're not feeling safe.
Mhm.
But now it's coming into the suburban and the city area. Anna, did you want to?
I actually have a lot of hope. I've seen out on the streets when I'm doing outreach as part of street medicine, it was really difficult because you'd see someone and they're it really just severely vulnerable to the extent that they're almost unable to interact with you. I remember seeing a young lady and I said, so I have a doctor here. Do you want to see him? He'd love to see what he could do to take care of you. And she's like, oh, I'm fine. I have HIV, congestive heart failure. I have atrial fib, I think she said, and I'm pregnant and I have discharge, right? So there were all these things that she said. I mean, really, this was like a true list. And I was just like, oh my goodness, none of this is okay. As I came to be employed with VOA, I realized by offering this opportunity to stabilize someone and let it be messy for them, so they don't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to follow every rule to stay in the shelter. If you want to yell, come and yell at me, right? Be upset, process what you're feeling. But I'll say as I have always been asked what I can do to help support individuals more. That and instead of being the fault of their success in our program being their problem, right? It's not what they didn't do. Is Anna, what could you do more? What could you have done better? And I think that's an important responsibility that we own and continue to challenge ourselves with is finding ways for meaningful services and accepting people, even when it's messy, as who they really are.
Thank you. And obviously, I believe there's hope. I wouldn't be here for 30 years. Leah wouldn't be here for 44 years. Amani Sawiris for 31, 32 years we do have a lot of hope, and I really admire all of our staff and our volunteers and our community supporters that want to invest in the solutions and continue offering hope. We do see miracles happen every day, and I know it's overwhelming to see more tents pop up and more individuals out there, but we also see so many people that get housing and move towards employment and owning their own homes. And we have so many of those graduates throughout the community, not just graduates of Volunteers of America programs, but graduates of other provider programs. Nobody's walking around with this badge or their stamp on their forehead saying previously homeless. They look like any one of us, right? And I think it's really important for them to also share their stories and being vulnerable, and it's challenging. We have a question from one of our guests, and I don't know if you all can answer this, and this is something that we're continuing to talk with our board and our leadership and other providers. The last part of it was, what he says, but what I see is government having short-term commitments to projects and constant change of focus. Nonprofit partnerships seem infrequent. The drive for funding creates more competition than cooperation. What can we do to make alliances and partnerships that lead to success? I completely agree with everything this individual said. It really takes cooperation. There is not one provider in town that can do it all. We have to work together. The government has to work together. We all have to create those solutions together. We're seen as kind of the best practice. The providers are the ones that are doing the work. They have the experience. They're working day in and day out. But it does take lots of conversations. We need to do better. We need to continue to come together. I often talk about with our staff that each one of them is a puzzle piece, and we all have to work together to help this individual move forward. It doesn't matter if it's the case manager that's kind of creating that housing plan, or it's the van driver, or it's the monitor that's up at midnight talking to this individual that can't sleep. Everybody has a role, but I really see that puzzle being for the whole community, right? It has to be local government. It has to be providers. It has to be community partners, businesses, volunteers. It really takes all of us. We all have a role, and we need to come together. I don't know how to answer that any better. It's not being done, but yes, Anna.
I would also add, sorry, my voice is crackling, that it's really important as a nonprofit that we behave ethically and continue to do the right thing, especially when we're working with our service partners, even when they're not. And just really having focus of who we are serving, and make sure that everyone on the team, from the person who checks someone in or answers the phone call to the case manager who may be helping them move, kind of speaks the same language and understands the commitment to doing the right thing for people.
And it's not easy, but yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
One thing I would add is to always have the conversation. Homelessness isn't going to go away by one person solving the problem. So I know within the communities that Volunteers of America, Northern California, Northern Nevada serve, we're at the table of these conversations, but to continue to have the conversations will help find the answers. I'm a firm believer that the answer is in the room. So it's those people that come to the table to bring questions often have solutions. And that's why Volunteers of America is so important to be at that table.
Thank you. It is 1 o'clock. I cannot thank our panelists enough for being vulnerable, for being honest, to sharing the challenges, but also offering the hope that we have every day. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this work. And I want to thank all of the guests that signed in, because obviously you have an interest, you care, you want to be a part of the solution. So thank you for continuing to show up. Please If you have more questions, please shoot Anna an email, or any one of us if you have our email address. Anna, I don't know if you want to put your email address in the chat. There you go. There's the Google Doc. Please just click on that. Give us your feedback. This is a conversation we want to continue to have. We're talking about having another one of these panel discussions. One of them might be with either current residents of our programs or recent graduates of our programs to kind of share a little bit more of their experience. So thank you again for joining us. Have a blessed day, and thank you for being a part of the solution.